Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 638 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our ninth book just came out. It's called From Letters to Leaders, The Legacy of Service. So I want you to go and pick up that book on Amazon today. I think it's the best book in the entire series. So go and check it out. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together. Fun fact, our next guest was actually in Nashville not too long ago, and we were able to go out with our wives out for an incredible Indian meal in downtown Nashville, Tennessee, and it was absolutely phenomenal. So let me tell you, if you're looking for restaurant, ideas and suggestions in downtown Nashville, and you love Indian food, I have a great spot for you. Just send me a message, and I will get you the name of the restaurant. It is absolutely incredible, and we had such a good time. Well, let's talk about our next guest. He is a passionate NPHC speaker, and Eddie Francis began his leadership journey as president of his Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated chapter at Loyola University New Orleans, where he was also vice president of the IFC. Because of his leadership, Eddie earned the Spirit of Loyola Award for racial understanding. He even choreographed a step routine that won second place at the ever popular Bayou Classic Battle of the Bands and Greek show. Eddie later served as an alumni chapter president and campus chapter advisor. Professionally, Eddie is a consultant who led marketing and communications at Southern University at New Orleans, Quinn College, Dillard University, and Talladega College. He is an adjunct instructor for Southern New Hampshire University, who has also taught at Tulane University and Dallas College. Additionally, Eddie's diverse professional background includes mass media and talent acquisition. Eddie earned his master's degree in strategic leadership from Tennessee State University here in Nashville. He is a member of the International Leadership Association, the Press Club of New Orleans, and the American Marketing Association. Eddie is the proud husband of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated member Dr. Halim Malik Francis and the proud father of Stevie. Welcome to the show, Eddie.
Hey, hey, man, it's good to see you, Mike. And yes, that dinner was delicious in Nashville. Man, we had the time of our lives. And I have to say that on behalf of my wife, she actually appreciates the title D9 Leadership Blueprint since she is a Zeta. So the title was approved.
Anything blue is going to be approved immediately. That is fantastic. And the
Yes.
next time I'm in New Orleans, you better believe my wife and I are going to see you guys, and we can't wait to have some New Orleans food. I'm still full from that meal that we had in Nashville, so it's going to take me some time to get hungry again. But but I'm looking forward to New Orleans for sure. Oh boy! All
Come
right, so
on
you've
down, my
been
brother. Come on down.
yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, I mean, you've been a Divine Nine member since 1989. You're a
Yeah.
former chapter president for Alpha Phi Alpha. When you look back at your early leadership years, what were some of the biggest mistakes or struggles that you had that eventually shaped this D9 leadership blueprint that you're now offering?
One of the biggest mistakes that I made is actually still a common mistake among students. I didn't ask for help. I became this chapter president a year into being in a fraternity. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought that leadership was do as I say. And so when the chapter didn't do as I said, I would fly off the handle, man. And if only I had thought back then that it's okay to say, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't understand why the brothers aren't responding. Please help me understand how to do this thing. If only I had done that, I think that things would have worked out way better. The story that I tell in both the presentation that I do, followership to leadership, and then also what used to be known as the Black Greek Success Program and is now known as the D9 Leadership Blueprint. But the story that I tell is that there was this one fateful night where things got so heated that I just flew off the handle at the chapter. And that was pretty much the last time that I was a college chapter president. And so that was really, really one of the biggest mistakes. And one of the things that I encourage students to do, especially students who have gotten the opportunity to meet at NGLA, AFLV, and now at SGLA, and when I do presentations, is don't be afraid of asking for help. This perfectionist journey that a lot of us go on in Greek life, this is not it. You know, we're not perfect. We're gonna make mistakes, and it's okay to ask for help so you can understand how to manage the leadership process.
That's excellent advice. So many students are drowning and they just don't raise their hand to say
Right.
that they need help. And there's a lot of people that can help. It could be the advisor on campus, it could be an alumnus, it could be your headquarters. I mean,
Hmm.
there's so many options. It could be you or I. I mean, there's so many people that are out there to help. And a lot of D9 members, they assume that leadership comes automatically when you get the letters or when you get the position as president, that immediately somehow, they wave this magic wand and you have leadership skills. So at what point did you realize that membership just gives you a platform, but leadership requires intentional development?
So this is the reason I wrote the D9 Leadership Blueprint. I didn't realize until I got into my career, Mike.
Hmm.
Like I'm all the way into my career, and I'll never forget the first time somebody told me, "Oh yeah, the CEO got a coach." And I'm going, "The CEO got a coach? What do you mean the CEO? They're the CEO. They know what to do, right?" And it just didn't make sense to me. In my perfectionist mind, I'm thinking to myself that when it comes to being intentional about leadership development, it didn't make sense for a CEO to need a coach. But that's when it all came together for me. And that's when I started thinking back on why things didn't work out as well as they could have when I was in college. And so thinking about the fact that even a CEO of a company that's doing really well, could use a coach so that they could do better and also to understand what their blind spots are. That's the kind of intentional leadership development that I really wish that I had engaged in and had when I was in college. And so the unfortunate answer to that question is that yeah, membership did provide the platform, but I didn't engage in any intentional leadership development while I was in college. It all happened when I was in my career. And even Mike, when I was an alumni chapter president, I
Hmm.
still struggled because I still kind of had that thing in my head that I had to do a perfect job. And that if I didn't do it perfectly, then my frat brothers were going to come down on me and it was going to be the worst thing ever in my life. And I will have failed and all these other things. And so I really want students to understand right now that there is not a point in your life when you are going to lead perfectly. At every point in your life, there's going to be some sort of change that's going to happen because of the people you're dealing with. And this is why I always tell people that leadership is a people-centered process. At some point, you're going to realize that you need another level of learning, and then another level of learning, and then another level of learning. And so, I think back to, this is probably the best point that I make, especially to Divine Nine students. We have Martin Luther King Jr., who was known as a figurehead in the civil rights movement. He didn't do it by himself.
Mhm.
I mean, you had Bayard Rustin, who was the strategist. You have that famous picture of Martin Luther King Jr. on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel with three other Divine Nine members: Jesse Jackson Sr. from Omega Psi Phi, Hosea Williams from Phi Beta Sigma, and Ralph Abernathy Jr. from Kappa Alpha Psi, and Bayard Rustin, who was a member of Omega Psi Phi. You have all of these people, just legions of people who were behind Martin Luther King and what he did, and they supported him and they strategized and they advised him. And that is the best way that I can describe intentional leadership development because he needed those people to work with him. He needed them to say, Andrew Young, another member of Alpha Phi Alpha, says this all the time. People had to say, "Hey, Martin, don't do this. Hey, Martin, you should try that. Hey, Martin, this is not the right way to go. Hey, Martin, this is the right way to go." And so that's the best way that I can really get students to understand that now is the best time while you're in college to be intentional about your leadership development instead of running into the buzzsaw that I ran into and finding out way in my career when it was just a little too late for me to do well in college.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about all of that. And the best leaders in the world, like you said, Dr. King is a good example, they require intentional development from other people. Another example, if you want to take yourselves out of the world of Dr. King, look at Michael Jordan, another Omega Psi Phi
Absolutely.
member. I mean, Michael Jordan, right? He had this coach in Phil Jackson that could push his buttons any night of the week and get 50, 60 points out of Michael. So like you just have to understand the most motivated, the best leaders in any field. Choose your field. I'm telling you, there are people around them that are helping to guide them and trying to get the best out of them every single night and go out and score 50, 60 points.
And to that point, when was Jordan at his best? When Pippen was on the floor.
Yeah, sure. Right. You
That's
need
when he
help.
was at his best. When he had Scottie Pippen to support him,
Yeah.
that's when he was at his best. Yeah, that's a great contemporary example. Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking for a contemporary example, and I think, that is something that people will respond to. And you describe this work that you're doing as blending research, real world leadership, and what you call D9 old head wisdom, which I love, by the way, very popular on Instagram. Why was it important to combine all three of these pieces instead of just writing a traditional leadership book?
One of the things that we do in the D9 is we lean a lot into our tradition and we lean a lot into experience. And then a lot of times what winds up happening is that we try to do the thing that the brother or the soror before us did, and it doesn't work for us. And we're going, well, why is it not working for me? And that's because experience has to be contextualized in some way. And so you can have the experience, but the experience doesn't mean anything if it doesn't follow a certain type of logic. Well, that's where the research comes in. The academic research really helps give language and it helps explain why something can work the way that it does. So, Mike, you know that I'm a big fan of the leader member exchange theory, right? And so that is a theory that I talk about with students to really help them understand that leadership can be very situational and also that it depends a lot on the kind of support that you get from the chapter members. And so blending all of that, I think, is really important. Where the D9 old head wisdom comes in is the storytelling, is really adding to that. Hey, this is what happened to me when I was an undergrad. No, this is not one of those way back in my day hero stories. This is way back in my day I screwed up. And so
Mhm.
that's the layer that I like to add to that. And one of the things that I've learned, contrary to what I've heard a lot of people say, is, and I've heard this at NGLA, I've heard it at AFLV, I know I'm going to hear it at SGLA, I've heard it when I've done presentations. College students want to be led. They want to be guided. They want to hear the stories. As long as the story isn't we had it better than you or we did it better than you. The stories they want to hear are authentic stories. They want to hear I made this mistake, but you can do better. And here's how you can do better. So when you're willing to be vulnerable with them, that's where the storytelling supports the research, but then also supports the experience.
Love it. Really good stuff. Now, as a D9 member, it's not easy being a D9 member. If we compare being D9 versus, let's say, IFC or Panhellenic, IFC and Panhellenic, some of these chapters are like 300 people. I mean, it's wild what we see at these conferences. Well, some of the D9 chapters, they're real small. I mean, and so what does that mean? That means that all of the work is on a few people, and a lot of D9 members have multiple positions in their organization to get all of the work done on top of school, on top of work, on top of relationships, family, all of the things. So, many of the chapter leaders in D9 feel like they're holding everything together with duct tape. How do you help leaders move from survival mode to intentional leadership?
Yeah, because my chapter got up to 15 people, and boy, we thought we had 100. We were,
Right? Right. In your mind, you're
uh,
like, we've got 100. No, you don't.
yes. Um, the first thing is by helping students see that leadership is indeed a process. It's not this set static thing. One of my favorite scenes from Star Trek, the movie Star Trek, when Chris Pine played Captain Kirk, there was this scene where Scotty got his transwarp equation and Mr. Spock had given it to him, and Scotty is going, huh. As I was doing this equation, it never occurred to me that space is the thing that's moving, and so that's how I look at leadership. It's a process where not the person is moving, the situation is moving. And I think that's one way to help students really get a hold of it by getting them to understand that concept that the process keeps moving and you have to figure out how to keep up with the process. But then also recognizing, as I mentioned before, that leadership is about people. People change. People bring all kinds of differences and all kinds of things that you're not ready for. And so you have to figure out how to be flexible with that. And then I think that the other thing, and this is probably the biggest thing to help D9 members really contextualize the intentionality of leadership, is that leadership is a skill. You can learn it. You can learn it. You really have to slow yourself down and give yourself time. And that's something I did not do when I was in college. I didn't slow down. I didn't give myself time. I thought I had to hit the ground running and everybody needed to do as I said. And I ran into a big brick wall that way. But I think that when students realize that they can master this process, or at least they can manage the process really well, and when they realize that the process is composed of some skills that they can learn to work with people, then that way they can kind of take the duct tape off a little bit and then they can actually put a solid chapter together. They're not building the plane as they're flying anymore. They're able to plan better, work with people better. And then on top of that, they're able to create some sort of mini succession plan where they find the new people coming in who are going to be the next great leaders of that chapter.
There you go. Let's start talking about succession and officer transition. These are
Yes.
things that are like, really not revolutionary anywhere in the corporate world, but for some reason in fraternity and sorority life, we completely forget about that. I mean, I'm like,
Yeah.
what? We just do a bad job with succession and officer transition. If we just did that one thing better, then I feel like fraternity and sorority life would be miles and miles ahead of where we are today.
Yeah.
For listeners who are undergraduate officers right now, maybe on exec board, maybe they're even committee chairs, what's one self-awareness exercise or maybe like a mindset shift that you would recommend that they try right now?
I want you to write down 10 things, students. I want you to write down 10 things that you want to see from your chapter. What I mean, as in, if you write these 10 things down, this is what your chapter looks like on its best day. And you know this is what it looks like on your best day. What are those 10 things that you want to happen? What do you want to accomplish before you graduate? And on top of that, in considering these 10 things, what do you want to see beyond the days that you're gone? You can look back and say, you know what? I wrote this down. These are some goals that I had. This is what I want to see from the chapter. The reason that this is a good idea is, again, it slows you down. It gives you time to think through things, and it gives you time to understand yourself as well, to understand what keeps you up at night, what gets you out of bed in the morning. I bring this up all the time that self-awareness is considered the first commandment of leadership. And so I think being able to focus on what someone really, really wants, regardless of the chapter office, just focusing on what you really want and what those 10 things are, then I think you can get yourself in a mindset to lead in a great way. And be prepared to get some feedback from people when you talk about these 10 things. Because the feedback is going to help you think even more through it and then maybe even build more trust with your chapter.
That's a great exercise. And if you're chapter president, I would say collect all of those goals from your chapter, and then you know how to motivate each one of those people
Yep.
because they were the ones that wrote down those goals. And you can say, all right, Eddie, it says here that you wanted a chapter of 50 people. Where are you during recruitment? Like, I don't seem to see you anywhere for intake in terms of helping people to come into our chapter. So I think that's a really good way to figure out how to motivate those people because now you're finding out what they want, and that's a great motivational tool.
Yeah.
So there's this idea of Ubuntu. I
Mhm.
am because we are, which is a very powerful principle in your blueprint. How does Ubuntu show up practically in fraternity and sorority leadership, not just philosophically?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it all starts number one with communication. People in the chat, you have got to talk to one another. It is so true that I am because you are you, and therefore because you are, I am. And what happens in that principle is, well, first of all, let me just say in the Divine Nine, we can lean into this naturally because one thing about people of African descent, we are naturally community oriented. And so it's already there for us. It's in our DNA. But to practice it, it starts with communicating with one another. One of the great examples of this is people going through the membership intake process. What you know, I'm supposed to know. What I know, you're supposed to know. And so we have these exercises when we lean into what our line brothers know or what our line sisters know. We hear it in history when you see the new members come out, the new member presentation, and they recite history together. That didn't just happen. That took a lot of trust. That took people really working together, working with one another, realizing that if I know this history, you know this history. If you know this history, I know this history. And we also see it in action and stepping. People see the end result of a great step show, but they don't know what goes into that. And again, what goes into that is communication, trust, realizing that if I'm not on the right step, you're not on the right step. If you're not on the right step, I'm not on the right step. You can transfer all of that into leadership practice, but it all begins with communicating and realizing that what impacts one is going to impact the other. You know, Mike, when I was going through my membership intake process, I'll never forget the story this brother told me of this scenario. He said, Eddie, you have to realize that whatever you do is going to impact the entire chapter. If you go to the bathroom and you don't wash your hands, nobody's going to say Eddie didn't wash his hands. They're going to say that nasty Alpha didn't wash his hands.
Nancy Alpha.
And so, and so I had to realize in that moment, and I didn't know about the spirit of Ubuntu at the time, but I had to realize that what I did impacted my frat brothers,
Yeah,
and what they did impacted me. And so we had to really think through that, but we also had to communicate with one another. And so I think that's how that principle can be practiced.
love it. You also talk about identifying your follower type. So, how does understanding followership actually make somebody a more effective leader?
Yeah, followership is one of my favorite concepts. I love this concept of being actively involved as a general chapter member with your chapter leadership, giving them feedback, asking them questions, all of that good stuff. Again, it begins with communication. And one thing people should understand is that followership is following, but following isn't followership. What I mean by that is you're naturally following if you're engaging in followership. But followership is about engagement. And some people, following doesn't always mean followership because some people are just blind followers. They just do whatever they're told. And that's not what that is. And so the way that followership can build leadership is by being actively engaged and communicating with your chapter leaders. And I encourage that because when you hear the way your leaders process things, then that can give you a cue of how you can be engaged with them. Now, you got to get past your own stuff too. Like you have to manage yourself in order to work with your chapter leaders. But the thing is that when you recognize what kind of follower you are based on this five follower type model that I share with students, when you realize what kind of follower you are, then you can realize, okay, this is the type of leader I want to be because brother so and so had a blind spot really doing this thing. And that kind of irritated me as a follower. So when I become a leader, I'm not going to do what brother so and so did. I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to do better than that. But brother so and so did this great thing, and I'm going to carry that tradition into the next version of the chapter. That's what followership does. But it does take active engagement, and also it takes recognizing your own behaviors and how they mesh or how they contrast from the other behaviors of your leaders in the chapter.
Yeah, everyone does have a different leadership style. So I think this is where college students are trying to figure out what is my style, right?
Yeah.
And what is my follower type, all of those things. And they're navigating that and figuring that out on the fly very quickly.
Yes, exact, man. Listen, I mean, I mean, it was, I mean, for me, it was, I don't like that. And that was pretty much where it ended. So,
Yep.
and there was nowhere for anybody to go after that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, I remember there was a chapter president that was two presidents before I took the presidency, and he ruled by fear. I mean, he would literally put people through a sheetrock if they disagreed with him. We have holes to prove it. So, you know what I
That
mean?
can't be healthy.
Yeah, that's not healthy. And then I looked at that and said, I don't like that. I am not going to rule by fear. That is just not who I am. And I just don't believe in it.
Right.
And sure enough, my leadership style, the chapter actually embraced. You can imagine they didn't really like this guy very much.
Yeah, not after, no, not after having it pull your head out of a sheetrock. No.
No, no, it just was not well received. It was a mistake, but he was a kid trying to figure it out, and that was the
Yep.
only way that in his mind he knew how to lead. It obviously was
Yeah.
not very effective.
Yeah.
So if a chapter officer only applied one concept from this new D9 leadership blueprint that you've created this semester, what would, create the biggest ripple effect, and why do you think it would work?
This goes back to self-awareness. I start the ebook off by talking about the importance of self-awareness and personal leadership. And there are these 9 questions that I encourage D9 members to ask themselves. I call them the 9 self-awareness questions. Who am I? What is my personal mission? What are my core values? What kind of future do I envision for myself? What are my strengths and weaknesses? Am I meeting my priorities as a college student? Why do I want to be? Why did I want to be a member of this fraternity or sorority? Do my mission, vision, and values align with my fraternity or sorority? And how do my actions and behaviors affect the people around me? I encourage those 9 questions. I think that is the starting point. I think if I tell this story to students, if I had asked myself a series of questions about what I was even doing in college in the first place, what my purpose was, I think I would have been a much more effective leader. So the one thing from the book that I would love for students to take me up on is ask yourself the 9 self-awareness questions.
Really good stuff. Now, especially within the D9, I think alumni and grad chapter members are really, really critical in terms of the success of these chapters. Or, unfortunately, we've seen examples where they're not successful. I just came back from AFLV Central and we were talking about the Caleb Wilson case, Omega Psi Phi at Southern University. That's an example where alumni members were not helpful and were quite toxic, and it led to the death of a student. So for all the alumni and grad chapter members that are listening, what is the role that they play in reinforcing intentional leadership instead of just critiquing from the sidelines?
There are a couple of things here. My frat brother, my friend Walter Kimbrough talks about this, that, the people who actually are the worst examples tend to be underemployed. They don't have anything going on socially for themselves. So all they have, their identity is attached to their undergraduate chapter. So I would follow that up by, you know, there was something that I mentioned in one of my D9 O-Head Wisdom videos. I mentioned the former Saints player and coach, Danny Abramowitz, who was doing an article, and it was an article based on faith. And he said sometimes the only gospel people are going to see is you. If I were to remove faith from that and say that in another way, I would say sometimes the only example of your fraternity or sorority that people will see is you. So the way that I think that alumni members can reinforce healthy leadership is to be an example. You have got to be the example. You can tell, and I know this from being a former advisor. You can tell students things all day and all night. If they don't believe you, they are going to do the opposite. But if you actually show them what you want them to be, then they are most likely going to follow that. So in the case of these students who are underemployed or whatever, once they get the job, or if they stay if they stay invisible until they tie down the job or start their business or whatever it is that they're gonna do, then students do take that as a positive sign. Not seeing you might be a good thing, right? So I think that when we take a look at um, what happens in the case, the case of Caleb Wilson, unfortunately, which I know a lot of people who know Caleb,
Hmm.
and in that case, that is an example of where I'm afraid that the college brothers in that case, they probably had a lot of cynicism about that entire situation, and that's common. So the biggest thing that I would love to see alumni members do is to be the example of moving forward in your life and what you want them to be, what you want your college brothers and sorors to be.
Yeah. Well, listen, I take that responsibility very seriously. I might be the only member of my fraternity that Eddie Francis knows. And so when I conduct myself, I want him to immediately think, oh, okay, that's what a member of that fraternity acts like. And that's how they conduct themselves, and that's what their values are. So that way, in case he does run into somebody else, he can say from actual experience, like, I know a member of that fraternity, and he is a fantastic example of what a real fraternity man is. I take that responsibility very seriously.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, that's really
And,
good.
and Mike, I see this, by the way, I see this on TikTok all the time where
Hmm.
people get on and they'll tell stories about something that rubs them the wrong way about a fraternity or sorority. And it always boils down to, I saw this one person do this thing.
Right.
Or somebody says, I love men of Kappa Alpha Psi because I saw this Kappa do this thing and blah, blah, blah. People almost always tell their stories based on an example of what someone did in that organization, at the most a few people.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Something for us to think about. And you emphasize that every leadership decision honors those who came before us and shapes those who come after us. So, how do you help young leaders understand legacy without completely overwhelming them with everything else they've got on their plate?
And that's what happened to me. That I was overwhelmed. I overwhelmed myself because as soon as I was initiated, I'll never forget the night I was initiated. The very first thing I told myself, that I think this led me down the path of just being a perfectionist, is I said, I'm in the same fraternity as Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh,
Oh
I mean,
boy.
how do you live up to that?
Right.
Good luck.
Right. And so I thought that's what I had to do, right? And so, but here's what I would tell college brothers and sorors right now. You were initiated because of who you are. You brought talents, you brought knowledge, you brought something special to the table that your fraternity or sorority saw in you. So by concentrating on the fact that you brought your talents, you brought your knowledge, you brought your skills to the table, I think that's a way for folks to not get overwhelmed and to not jump into this perfectionist thing, by realizing that they are good enough. You don't have to live up to something that some legendary someone who was doing great things in the 20th century did. You don't have to live up to that. But what you have to do is you have to hold yourself responsible for doing the best that you can do. And I think that's also where looking for help and looking for mentoring can be really big for college brothers and sorors. But what I would say, without getting to not get overwhelmed, just realize that you were initiated because there was something about you, something very special about you, that got you in, and that they believe, your brothers and sorors, they believe that it's going to carry your chapter and your fraternity or sorority to the next phase in its history. But it begins with you believing in yourself.
Yes, that's a great point. I mean, your chapter obviously saw something in you when they gave you an invitation to join. So just focus on that and your talents. Everybody has certain God-given talents. Eddie does certain things that I don't do well, and I do some things well that maybe Eddie doesn't do well. In my fraternity is a past quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, Tony Romo. I will never throw the football like Tony Romo can throw the football. He's got a certain God-given talent and an arm that is just head and shoulders above everybody else. I will never have that. But I do have certain talents that Tony doesn't have. And so you just
Yeah.
got to exploit those things and understand that your chapter chose you for a reason. Focus on those things. Really great stuff, Eddie. I
I
really
heard he's a
enjoyed.
good basketball player too.
Yeah, well, that guy is he's just a great athlete. I
No,
think he
see,
could
I
have done
met his
anything.
orthopedist, believe it or not. I met his orthopedist, and I heard that he is the bomb basketball player.
Yeah,
So there you go.
he's a great athlete. I think he
Yeah.
could do anything. Honestly, I think he could do anything. But certain people have just God-given athletic abilities, and I think
Yeah.
people who play in the NFL at that level, starting quarterback, I would say obviously, you've got something that the rest
You're
of us
probably
just
kind
didn't
of
get.
good at stuff.
You're probably pretty good at athletics, I'd say. Really good stuff. All right. So, after all of this, where should all of our D9 listeners go to download the D9 Leadership Blueprint?
Yeah, go to d9leadershipblueprint.com, d9leadershipblueprint.com, and you will see where you can go ahead and take a look at the ebook right now.
That is fantastic. Everyone go to d9leadershipblueprint.com. Go and download that blueprint. I am telling you, it is exactly what you need, especially if you're a D9 member and you're looking for help. The help is out there. You just need to reach out and go and grab it. So, for all of our listeners, if you learned something today talking to Eddie Francis, please share this episode with your chapter. Just drop it in a group chat with your D9 chapter or share it on social media. Share a link to the D9 Leadership Blueprint on social media. You never know who's going to need that blueprint, so you might as well just put it out there in the universe. So, Eddie, thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you, brother.
You got it. And to our listeners, we hope to see you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Bye for now.